Okay, so now we have our robot rigged. We're going to create a walk with our robot. And before we do that, let's just talk about walks in general. I wanted to delve into the building blocks of what is happening in a walk and why it works the way it does. And so I have a small Pinterest page here set up where we can look at each of these. I have these sort of playing in a loop. Three completely different types of walks. We have Wolverine who's kind of stomping, and we have this guy who's kind of bebopping to something in his head. She's just on a mission to get to work or get somewhere. I don't know. And this guy's just sort of this plain vanilla walk. And so, although all these are really different, they're all kind of built up of the same pieces. And so we're going to talk about those pieces and how to input those into our rig in a pose-to-pose fashion to create a walk cycle. Okay, or actually it's not going to be it's going to be a cyclable loop, but it's not going to be specifically a cycle. Our character is going to be moving forward. So let's start off with some of the imagery that we see a lot when talking about a walk cycle. This is an image that we see from Preston Blair's book. I think it's called Cartoon Animation. And so in this you'll see that he has all the stages of a walk cycle, but he also has a whole bunch of different ones here as well. This is the one that you'll see most referenced, and this is from the Animator Survival Kit. Now, although I don't completely agree with all of these poses, I agree with the poses. I think some of these are a little over-exaggerated, but they're exaggerated to make a point about what is happening in this. So the amount that we dip on the up and go up and down on the up and down poses is probably a little bigger than what you would want in a realistic walk cycle, and maybe even a little smaller than what you would want in a cartoony walk cycle. So these don't feel like you have to copy these exactly. This is here as reference for what is actually happening in the walk, or in the four poses that make up a walk cycle. So what we have here now, I'll go through them really quickly, is the contact pose, the down pose, the passing, the up, and then we have another contact. And you'll see on the second contact, the left leg, the character's left leg is forward, where on the first contact, his right leg is forward. Now, if we just looped that and played that over and over again, that would not make a perfect walk cycle, right? Because we end on this, or we start on this right foot forward, we end on the left foot forward, and if it just looped back to the beginning, his feet would pop, right? So for this to be a full cycle, it really has to be these poses on both sides of the body, right? So pretty much we have these four poses, and then starting with this contact, we have those four poses again on the other side, right? And so what we're going to mainly go over today is what each of these poses are doing to the body, or what the body is doing to the world to generate these poses. Working in a pose-to-pose method, we're going to then go in and put our character into these four poses and then the next four poses to get the character to walk. But we're going to keyframe everything to get so we can be working in sort of a pose-to-pose method. So let's talk about each of the poses first. So we first have our contact pose. That's also our other contact here. You'll see that. And you can probably guess why it's called the contact pose. We have this little giveaway here. This is the first pose where your front foot is contacting the ground. It's also the last pose in which this foot is contacting the ground. As you see, as we go into our next pose, that foot sort of kicks off the ground and isn't touching it anymore. And the next pose is where this front foot sort of accepts that weight of the body. The contact pose is important because this is a key element, right? This is the key point in time in the walk, right? This is where things change, is after this point when we hit the ground. The body currently, and this is an interesting point, is staying in balance because we are countering our arms. So if our right foot is forward, which it is in this pose, then our right arm is going to be back, right? And so what that's going to cause is our body is just going to, our chest and our hips are kind of twisting, right? This part of our body is moving back, this part is moving forward, and so our torso is sort of twisting, right? And it does that to keep us in balance, because if you don't twist like this, then your spine sort of stays locked and your head flops around everywhere. This is kind of to keep our head sort of stable as it goes across. You'll see our arms are kind of umbrellaing out a little bit there, or sort of sticking out. As we move into our next pose, our down pose, you'll see that our arms kind of umbrella out. As we drop, they kind of shoot out a little further, right? It's like the little army man with the parachute. If you drop him, that umbrella sort of pops out, or that parachute sort of pops out because it's dropping, right? Well, it's kind of the same thing. What we'll notice in the down pose is that our character is now passed the weight of their body onto that front foot, and that caused the knee to bend. On the contact pose, that knee is perfectly straight. And this is something you have to be careful with in a rig, because if you make it perfectly straight, you can get some IK pop. But we're going to get it as straight as we can, because that gives our character the most amount of room to absorb that energy once they take that weight on, right? The rear foot, you'll see, is just kicked off and sort of pushed backwards, right? So by default, if we don't do something with that, this foot will just start drifting forward. So we want to make that extra effort to make it look like it's sort of pushed off on the ground behind us, right? Now our passing pose is called the passing pose for pretty obvious reasons. Everything is passing each other, right? The left leg is passing the right leg as it goes forward. The right arm is passing the torso as it goes forward. The left arm is passing the torso as it goes back. And the character is, for the most part, standing up relatively straight. Now, if we looked at this character from the front view, we would see that he's not perfectly straight. His weight will be shifted over his right foot, because you have to do that to stay in balance. Right? So the passing pose is sort of the pose where everything is sort of changing positions. I like to think of it as sort of a pole vault. So if your right leg is your sort of this base of support, you push off on this contact and down and sort of launch yourself over that top leg, or that front leg. Okay, so if that's the pole vault, this is the point where you're right at the peak of that pole vault. The up is when you actually start falling forward over the edge, right? And so right now our character is completely out of balance. He's falling forward. One of the concepts that I really like is to think of a walk as a perpetual fall forward. So what your character is doing is pushing themselves forward over this leg, and then at this point they're pretty much in balance, but then to keep moving forward you have to fall out of balance. And so your character's falling forward here, right? And if they don't throw that leg out in front of them, they'll fall on their face. So that's what this pose is. Our our left leg is sort of being thrown forward. It's also the highest point in our walk cycle. That's why we call it the up, because you sort of, as you're falling forward, you go up a little bit higher than you do in your passing pose, to kind of buy yourself a little bit more time as you throw your leg forward. Okay? And then when we get to our contact pose, that means you've got your leg out there in time to catch yourself, and the whole thing starts over again. Couple of things to notice. Our head is sort of making this bouncing ball shape. It doesn't quite hit the ground as sharply here as it would in a bouncing ball, but it does still kind of have that. It depends on how hard you want that walk to feel, how weighty you want it to feel. And the hips are making the same motion. So that's another reason we kind of explore the bouncing ball. Now, again, this is an exaggerated version of it. Your passing pose, I don't usually think your toe comes that far off the ground. I don't think you usually go up on this toe quite so high in real life. But for a cartoony walk, it kind of works. And I think the crucial element to remember is this is not just for a plain walk. This is for every possible type of walk that you would want. A walk, a sneak, a shuffle. Like, they all have a contact, a down, a passing, and this is probably what I would call my up, right? A run has a contact, a down, this is the passing, and this probably is the up, run through here, right? And so he has a couple of extra frames in here to sort of show you the whole thing. Even a jump, contact, down, passing, up, right? I guess this is really the up. And so all of these are crucial poses to describe the physics that is happening with your body during that time. I have a couple of videos in here on this Pinterest page. I don't know what this title is all about, but if you look at it, contact, down, right, passing, and we'll notice in the passing pose she shifted her weight over that leg a little bit more. And then I went a little bit past the up, so that's probably the up there. And then we're back down to contact, down, passing, up, contact, down, passing, up. And so this happens over and over and over again in the walk. And this is true of most cycles, right? We can see here, contact, down, probably passing, up, and then, yeah, contact, down, passing, up. So these are important elements of every sort of locomotion cycle. And it's not just sort of like a formulaic way of doing it. It's your body, you know, if you're just picking something off a shelf, your toes maybe aren't affected, but it's part of your entire body, and it doesn't stop. It's just this all of those things are just this, your walk forward. So I'm not going to do a perfect cycle. For a video game, you would do a cycle in place. It would be right. I'm going to go ahead and make my character, you know, just sort of and so I'm going to start off in sort of a neutral pose, not completely neutral, but somewhat neutral. I'm going to have my character take 2 steps, and then what I want to do is I want to sort of polish those steps. I want to get those looking pretty good, and then I'm going to duplicate them twice. That's not true with a video game character. And a video walking in place, because that character needs to be able to walk anywhere in the entire, right? And the player like it's walking around the world. There's multiple different ways that you'll need that, but we have a forward. This one up. Color to this thing just so I can see it. Okay. Now again, this is really important in working in the post-to-post. but I'm not I have a game. And so that keyframe on it. And so I don't really want to do that. I want to be able to quickly grab. So if I go to custom, and I already have a few here, don't worry about those too much. If I go to my base M, so right, that's the snippet of code that does it. But if I pasted it here, the second delete it. So all of these are little. This is like a way of monitoring what those snippets of code are. Or snippets of, it's not code. It's like scripts are. And so we're going to leverage. And so entire character. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my custom, and I'm going to middle click, and I'm going to drag that, drop it. I can call this all. Right. All. Click it. It selects my entire character. Out just a touch. And zero some of this out. than less than keys. You can see I can snap forward, and it looks like that foot is kind of sliding back. Even if I raise the toe up to where it's on the ground, it feels like that foot sort of slid backwards. So I'm going to that's fine. Something like that. Maybe even pull it back a little bit more. Okay. Let's say that that's my back pose. I'm going to go ahead and stick it. So, the question now is how long do you do 2 steps? About 1 second for. And since we're at 24 frames a second inside of Maya, I'm just going to go out to frame 34, and that's going to be my loop point. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit S there. And so I'm just going to sort of frame that up now. Let's do 100, and then I'll do this 34 and 10, right? And so now 10 to 10, I want this to loop, but I want it to loop offset, right? I want this character to be back in this pose, but I want them to be in this pose, 2 strides forward, right? So if that's true, then I'm, my next step, this, let's see, this foot will be 1, 2, about there, right? And so if I hit S, like that's about the distance our character is going to travel. Okay, for 2 steps, right? So let's play around with that now, and that doesn't have to be perfect, but I've just kind of did a, the distance that those 2 steps would take, and it may even be a little longer than that. You could always do this just as a test. You could create a locator and put that right there. If you go about halfway through between that, that's going to be about frame 22. Yeah, so that feels about right. And then if we duplicated that locator, put it there. Yeah, it's feeling a little. That's feeling about right, really. That's about where we'd want them to be, right? If that's halfway through, yeah, we're maybe a little far forward or a little far behind it, but I would rather be a little behind it than not far enough, or than too far. So those are just sort of little measuring things. And that's not a very exact way of doing it, but forward. So passing up, contact down, passing up. And we next contact. Full. So the question is, what's the next pose we? And when I either say or pass, right? But what I'm actually going to do is, and the reason. Okay, and so contact on frame 22. So again, I'm going to select everything, hit S, and I'm basically just going to make this a mirror of my current pose. Right. So if I move this foot forward and this foot backward, I can start sort of messing around with that and getting something that works a little bit better. So let's see how that works. That's way too far forward. So I want it to look like it just sort of rolls across where that foot is. Roll my toe up. And then this one, take my heel back. I'm alright with this as it is because I've actually twisted my character a little bit too. So I want to twist her back and maybe be able to get a little bit more information out of that. I'm also going to zero out that toe. Let's see. I think, just looking at this, I think this last pose can actually go a little further forward now. Sort of basing on where this foot lines up here in between those two poses. Actually feels like it slides back a little bit, so I'd do something like that. Right. And so that's feeling a little bit more like what I would expect. And so, is the rest of this pose looking okay? Could be a touch better. I may have also rotated her just a touch too much. There we go. Alright. Now if I hit play on this, bit of a walk cycle now. It's a really bad one, but it's a walk cycle, right? Or it's a walk. And so this is our contact, contact, contact. Right? That's all we really have there. So what I'm going to continue to do is just sort of subdivide this. I could do the down passing up, but what I want to do instead is the passing down up. And that's what happens is if I have this amount of timeline, I'm cutting it in half to get the passing pose. And that means I have some free information on my passing pose, right? So if I go halfway in between my two contacts here, which would be about frame 16, you'll see that that's not exactly my passing pose, right? That's not exactly what I want the passing pose to look like, but it's probably closer than some of the others. So I'm just going to use this to build my passing pose. So some stuff is alright, like the location of this foot. I'll go ahead and sort of zero that out. Zero out the toe. Right, and then that foot is probably about in the right location now. Like, that feels right for the most part. It's got a little bit of sliding there, but we can work on that if we need to. Really, to me, it feels like it needs to move forward just a touch. Something like that, right? And then that needs to move forward a little bit too. But we can, again, we can fix that as we go. Around, angle the knee out, and I can raise my character up. Maybe push her over this leg a little bit more, and then make this leg, sort of do the pass, right? It's passing by. We're actually really lazy creatures. We barely clear the ground with our toes, and the reason for that is because if we were, taking them up really high, that's kind of wasting energy, right? And we, that's just more berries we would have to find in the forest, right? So this is what I'm going to go with, and you'll see that there are some of these channels that haven't been keeping everything and hitting S. Sometimes I'll actually do that on everything and sort of step through them and hit S. And so now you're going to see we're getting a little bit of something different on that. Like, that's feeling a little bit better now on that first step. That second step still feels kind of weird. All right. So again, halfway in between here, I think it's going to be about 28. I'm going to go ahead and hit S to set a keyframe on everything, and then start zeroing some stuff out. Get my character down on the ground. Oh, that's another thing. Maybe I need to do rotate. Maybe that's part of why that other pose was looking kind of weird there. Rotate X. Yeah, that's looking a little bit better. So let's go ahead and finish up this pose, and then I'll take a break on this. So I'm going to flatten out my toe. I'll push my character up to that height again, and sort of over this foot. And then, again, angle this foot to get some natural, like a passing pose. Push that in just a touch. Okay. And so now if I were to watch this, let's grab everything in this just to make sure. If I were to watch this, feeling really close to a walk now. The last few things that are missing, of course, are our down and our up pose, and that's where we're going to really put in our weight. And then after that, we're going to loop that and, or we're going to polish that a little bit or clean that up the curves for that, and then loop that animation and duplicate it. So, so we'll come back to that in the next video. This one's getting a little long as it is, so so I'll pick this back up in the second video. Talk to you soon. Bye.